I want to make this out of glass. So after playing both Horizon games for way too many hours, I made the mistake of purchasing an art book that gave me way too many ideas. And this is the picture I used to make my stained glass template. So we have a lot of glass pieces to cut. I've never made a large scale flat piece. And while that might sound easier than some of the 3D pieces I've done, I have a feeling it's gonna be a lot more complicated than I think because of the sheer size. And then we have to make a frame for it all to sit in that has electronics that can light up the back of it so you can see all the colors. So this one's gonna be interesting. Let's get started. So I got 2 different copies of this large format template printed out. One I'm keeping entirely intact so I can use it as a like an alignment jig, make sure that all the pieces that I cut out are accurate and they all fit well together. And the other one was used to make all the pieces. So I'm going to glue all of the colored pieces to their colored glass sheets, and then we'll get started with cutting. With the help of some very good maker friends, we managed to get a lot of the 335 pieces cut out. We did this in an assembly line. One person glued on the template, another one traced the template outline with a silver Sharpie to prep for grinding, and the other scored and snapped the glass pieces. All while not misplacing any pieces. Huge thank you to Emily and George from Technically Woodworking and Wes at Geeksmithing for helping out with this first huge step. In total, it took from April 20th to May 5th to finish cutting out all the pieces. So I'm a little over halfway done grinding and cutting out all of these pieces, but I realized that there are some issues that I didn't fully anticipate when I started this project. After coming from building the stained glass shuttle, I had a false sense of understanding about how complicated a 2D piece would be. If I have a mistake that happens in this corner, it just perpetuates down the entire piece. So instead of being able to work in phases and kind of do some grinding followed by some taping followed by like some assembly, I have to do everything in order. I have to make sure all of these pieces are accurate to each other in line from this corner all the way down before I can move on to any of the future steps. What I need to do now is just continue grinding all my pieces away, making sure everything fits, tape them down as they're secured and correct, and keep moving forward to the taping process. I immediately started grinding all the pieces the second that we were done cutting them. The grinding process took us all the way to June 19th. Like I said before, 2D pieces are very complicated. It required my grinder to be out for weeks straight, making sure that as each new piece was added, the following piece did not push us out of alignment. There were many days spent in the craft room working on 10 pieces alone, just trying to make sure they fit perfectly. Making a tree. The last thing I didn't fully anticipate when designing my piece was complex curves in some of my designs. I designed the tall neck, for instance, to have a lot of intricate pieces that in my head I assumed I could do on the grinder, when in actuality, where we're at right now, I can't get those complex shapes with my grinder. So I actually had to go out and purchase a ring saw, which will allow us to get into all of those detailed little nooks and crannies. The ring saw finally allowed us to place some of the more intricate pieces onto the template. This piece in particular was designed as a piece within a piece. Why I thought this was going to work on a standard grinder is beyond me, but we were finally able to move forward with the finishing and grinding and aligning once we had this ring saw. In doing some research on stained glass windows, I realized that I need to add some additional reinforcement to my piece to make sure that it doesn't flex or bend. One thing I did find was reinforcing strips called Restrip, which is basically a tiny piece of copper that I'm going to put in the long channels that run straight through the piece to give it a little bit more rigidity. The other thing I'm going to be doing to this whole outside perimeter of the piece is adding zinc cam. With cam is you take a piece of glass and you put it right in there and you solder right up to the piece, and it keeps it nice and rigid and allows for nice straight lines. So when this is all put together, all four sides will have this cam around it that will help keep its rigidity and allow us to put it into the light box that we want to use to illuminate this piece. The final step before soldering was to apply the copper tape to all the pieces. I went with a black backed copper tape because I knew I was going to patina all of the pieces black. The tool you see me using is a taping jig. I purchased this because I needed to tape 335 pieces, and I was not about to do that all by hand. While I operated the jig, Turi flattened all the pieces down. Through the power of teamwork, we managed to finish taping all the pieces in around 3 days. Many of the pieces did still need to be altered. Trying to force that many pieces into a perfect square is really hard. In fact, by the end it's still 100% not square. It's a giant puzzle that has a little too much give in some spots, causing it to never settle in the same spot twice. Nothing will be permanent until solder. To help through the taping process, we did attach a yellow string for us to see where those straight lines were supposed to run down the piece. Finally, it was time to start soldering. We started by applying a good amount of flux and just started laying down solder in between each piece to get them to stick together. This was simply to make sure everything was done moving before we started doing the larger soldering passes. Our friends Wes at Geeksmithing and Ben from Make for Life Workshop came by to help us with the first round of soldering. It took about 2 days and 3 full rolls of solder to get the front and back completely done. Last part of the soldering was to apply the cam. I cut each piece with 45-degree angles using side snips, slipped them onto the glass, and soldered them in, securing them in place. Once it was all soldered, I used some quick clean to remove the flux and tested the colors with a light box, but no spoilers yet, so let's take it outside for some patina. I don't normally apply the patina outside, but I didn't have an area large enough inside, so the patio it is. Like I said earlier, I'm going to be using black patina on this piece. Because of the size of the piece, I needed to use almost about the entire bottle. I scrubbed it on with a sponge and a soft bristle brush, making sure to get into every section. After a hose off, I cleaned it with some soap and water. Now it was time to finally start thinking about how we were going to mount this to the wall. The original idea for this window wall was taken from our friends over at I Like to Make Stuff. We will leave a link to their video below. We couldn't recess it because there's a shower on the other side of this wall, so we built out. 1x2s were the appropriate thickness for the light box, so we used that rather than 2x4s to not lose too much space in the hallway. The glass needed a frame to sit in, so we made that frame first before adding it to the wall. We wanted to make this glass piece removable, so we had to get creative with how we attach it to the wall. This frame was really just a place for the glass to sit with the diffusion panel. We eyeballed where we wanted the glass to sit permanently and affixed the frame to the base. Once it was attached, we built up the shiplap wall around it, covering the remaining exposed sections of the light box. We painted it white and started to build the exterior removable frame around it. The glass itself is held in by trim pieces with screws. This allows us to take the glass out quickly without dismantling anything else. Finally, using a fancy chair rail, we built the frame in place and pinned it to the wall. I filled in some gaps in the frame and then we turned our hallway into a spray booth to paint it all. Somewhere during this entire process, we added a light switch to the hallway to operate the box, but we're not going to show that process because we're not electricians, and if you want to do this, you should probably call one. Let's take a look at the final shots. If you stayed with us till the end, I want to thank you all for watching. Huge shout out to all of our Patreon members. It's because of you guys that we can do crazy projects like this. The template I used for this project will be available on Patreon. I also created a resin-friendly version of this piece in case you don't want to take up glass work. There are a lot of projects over the years that I've said are my favorite, but when I look at this and see how much we had to learn and grow to make it happen, this makes me the most proud. Thanks so much for watching, guys. See you next time.